Recording, Emily. So welcome, everyone. This is a meeting of the Subcommittee on Accessory Dwelling Units of the Housing Advisory Board that was appointed by the Housing Advisory Board to work with the Planning Department and work on revising our ADU bylaw to conform to the requirements of the Attorney General expressed in their letter. I am Jonathan Klein. I'm a member of the HAB, and I think I was appointed as chair of the subcommittee. The other members of the subcommittee we have 3 of 4 here today. We have a subcommittee of 4, which is myself, Tommy Rankus, Kelly Hardebeck, and Alex Krieger. Alec was unable to make it. So let me call the roll first formally, as I think I'm required to do. We're holding this meeting on Zoom under government, the prior governor's emergency order, I think, which permits us to do so. So calling the roll, I'm here, Tommy Rankus.
Here.
And Kelly Hardebeck.
Here.
Thank you. And let me also call the roll of the staff members that are with us. Emily DeHogue, sorry.
Here.
Maria Morelli.
Here.
Kara Bruton.
Hello.
Wade said here, and Awana Lindo Smith.
Here.
And Jonathan Simpson.
Hello.
And I also see Jake Collins, right?
Yes, here.
Okay, thank you. We are well represented by staff here. Thank you very much. I also see several members of the public and appreciate your participation. This is not a public hearing, but it is a public meeting, and we will try to the extent possible to be able to get comments from the public as well, to the extent that's appropriate as we go through the conversation. It's a pretty small group, so I think we can be informal about that. So with that, let me turn it over to Emily and the staff for any further introductory words and to give us a little bit of background as we get started. Well, as I do that, I will say that one of our tasks, I think, is going to be deciding, based on what we hear today and how far we get, the timing of what we want to do in terms of moving this forward for the fall town meeting, or whether the issues are of a type that make us want to postpone some or all of them until the spring town meeting. So I think that's something we want to keep in mind. I personally think it would be important, if we can, to get as much done now as we can and to meet the current fall town meeting deadlines, to bring our bylaw in conformance with state requirements, but that our ability to do that remains to be seen. So with that, let me turn it over to Emily or Kara, or whoever's going to take over for the staff.
If I don't know if Kara has anything to say before they start the presentation, so I'll just jump right in to give you all some background. I know people are more or less familiar with what's happened with ADUs and then the current regulations from the state, but I'm just going to go over it so everyone's on the same page. Give me a second here. Sometimes Zoom doesn't show share when you're in a smaller screen. Okay, here we go. Can everyone see the presentation?
Yes. Yes.
Yes.
Great. So this is going to be pretty brief. Is it on presentation mode?
Not full screen, unless you want full screen.
Okay. So you don't see the notes page?
We do see the notes page, or no. The next slide. No notes, but just the next slide.
Okay. I think there's a way of switching it. Okay. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
All right. So first, how did we get here? Why are we looking at this again? First off, the state statute that came out through the Affordable Homes Act. It was signed by Healy on August 6, 2024. So that was about a year ago. And then in response, Brookline revised their ADU bylaw, which was last year in fall 2024. From there, we had new regulations from the state introduced, which interpreted some of the things in the original statute. So that came out from State Department, EOHLC, and that took effect in February of this year. So Brookline had two different bylaws, two different warrant articles that were bylaws for ADUs. And I believe Maria can nuance this a little more than I can, but the Attorney General reviewed those and then sent us a letter that was in the packet for the meeting, responding to that, the submission of the bylaw, because that's their role. The Attorney General reviews the bylaws that we submit. So we got that on June 2025. I'm going to go over some definitions. It's going to be a lot of reading, might be kind of boring, but I think we need to set the ground for our stage. What is an ADU and what is a protected ADU? So the new regulations talk a lot about what is a protected ADU, and that's going to be really important to discuss. So first, what is an ADU? It's a self-contained housing unit that includes sleeping, cooking, sanitary facilities on the same lot as a principal dwelling, which we'll also talk about. The state does define that. Subject to otherwise applicable dimensional and parking requirements, that maintains a separate entrance, either directly from the outside or through an entry hall or corridor shared with a principal dwelling, sufficient to meet the requirements of the building and fire code for safety egress. They may be attached, detached, or internal of the principal dwelling. So under that subcategory, we have a protected use ADU, and this is what the state is providing these guidelines for. So a protected use ADU is an attached, detached, or internal ADU that is located or proposed to be located on a lot in a single family residential zoning district and is not larger in gross floor area than 1/2 the gross floor area of the principal dwelling, or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller, or a larger gross floor area if allowed by the municipality, provided that only one ADU on a lot may qualify as a protected use ADU. An ADU that is non-conforming to zoning shall still qualify as a protected use ADU if it otherwise meets this definition. All right, and the last definition we're going to talk about is a principal dwelling. It's a structure, regardless of whether it or the lot it is situated on conforms to zoning, including use requirements and dimensional requirements such as setbacks, bulk, and height, that contains at least one dwelling unit, and will be located on the same lot as a protected use ADU. Okay, so I'm just going to go over these real quick. It's just talking about what the state has in its regulations. The first one is repetitive, maintains a separate entrance from the outside or entry hall corridor with the principal dwelling unit sufficient to meet the requirements of the state building code for safe egress. It must be either no larger than the gross floor area of the principal dwelling or 900 square feet, whichever is smaller. And it must meet local municipal restrictions, including but not limited to additional size restrictions and or restrictions are prohibited or on short-term rental if the city or town decides to impose these. This is, I think, really a good table to look at as well. This is what municipalities can impose reasonable restrictions or requirements on and what they cannot impose, which is not completely exhaustive, but here are the main points. So it may impose reasonable restrictions on site plan review, Title V requirements, which are for clean air and sewage, I believe, regulations concerning dimensional setbacks in the bulk or height of structures, and short-term rentals. What municipalities cannot impose reasonable restrictions or requirements for are require owner occupancy nor family relationship for the ADU or the principal dwelling, require a special permit or other discretionary zoning approval for the use or rental of an ADU. So that's a big one. Require more than one parking space for an ADU located outside of a half a mile commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station. So Brookline has a lot of those, not ferry, but bus stations. Require any parking for an ADU located within 0.5 miles from commuter rail station, subway station, ferry terminal, or bus station. Okay, so what should a city or town do if its zoning is not consistent with the ADU law? The last regulations, they came out February 2nd, 2025. So any zoning provisions that are inconsistent with ADU law and ADU regulations are unenforceable. A protected use ADU, as defined by the ADU regulations that we went over, cannot be subjected to local regulations that disallow by state law. So the law trumps for protected use. Therefore, a local permitting decision should not take into account any local zoning rules that conflict with the ADU law or ADU regulations in general, or when applied to a particular protected use ADU permit application. So again, the protected use ADU is key here. And then my last slide is dimensional standard rule of thumb. Imposed dimensional standards are protected use ADUs that are no more restrictive than those required for the principal dwelling, a single family residential dwelling, or accessory structure within the same zoning district, whichever results in more permissive regulation. So for example, the most permissive regulation for the protected use ADU may include minimum setbacks for accessory structure or the maximum height for a single family residential dwelling or duplex. So hopefully that was helpful. Let me stop sharing. Okay. Do you want to keep going into the draft, Jonathan, or did you want to pause here? What do you think?
Well, I have a question of clarification. Maybe we should stop and see if there are any questions of clarification so far. So is my understanding correct that if something in Brookline's bylaw, for example, an owner occupancy requirement, conflicts with the requirements of the new regulations, that it's unenforceable? So that if somebody came to the building commissioner and applied for a ADU, that the building commissioner, it's up to the building commissioner to resolve that conflict and interpret it consistent with the state law. So I guess I'd like to clarify that that's correct, but also maybe someone on staff could tell us how that's been working since February 2nd, and that these new, and since the new regulations, and in particular since the Attorney General's letter came down, in terms of the building commissioner's applications that are happening for ADUs, and how we're dealing with them.
Jonathan, I don't see Dan Bennett here. He wasn't, maybe he will be coming later. Do you know, Emily, if he's not
able to come to this meeting, but he'll come to the next one.
Okay. There might have been a few ADUs that are internal, and perhaps they were straightforward. So we haven't had any, we've had a lot of questions, at least coming to the planning department, about detached ADUs. And we're pretty much saying that we're in this kind of gray area right now. So I have not seen any applications. I'm not going to speculate what the building commissioner might do. So it might be, if we could just hold off on that so we don't spread rumors and speak for him, we'll get an answer for you next week.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm really just trying to assess the urgency of moving forward in bringing our law into compliance, or whether we're okay without doing that. So
we understand that gray area does present an issue. Sometimes I'll at least say with Dover uses, not ADUs, but Dover uses, when there appears to be a conflict, what the building commissioner has indeed done is he has taken it to this, referred it to the ZBA. So
explain for everybody what Dover uses are, just so that we are all on the same page?
absolutely. Thank you for the reminder. So Section 3 of Chapter 40A, the Zoning Act, is referred to colloquially as the Dover Amendment. And you're probably familiar with religious uses or educational uses that can only be regulated in a reasonable manner in terms of bulk and height, parking, and so forth. And the ADU provision, the state has put the ADU provision in Section 3 in the Dover Amendment, which does give protected use ADUs a bit of latitude.
Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other sort of clarification questions? I mean, the next thing on the agenda is that the staff has drafted a proposed amendment to our ADU bylaw, and we're going to work our way through that. It was in the materials, so people who wanted to have had a chance to look at it in advance. But are there any, before we get to that, any clarification questions about the state requirements, the AG letter, anything we've covered so far?
May I ask a question, Jonathan?
Sure.
Was that draft posted with the meeting notes?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, I apologize. I missed it and I'll follow along. Thank you.
Okay.
Jonathan, I'll add that all of the building commissioners across the state are being asked to track data. And there was one building permit application for an ADU from January to June. This is hot off the press data shared from Dan Bennett to give you a sense of what he's seen. However, as Maria was alluding to, there's older cases where, you know, a structure might have been permitted either by right or by ZBA for like a garage with a living area over it. And those are the kind of cases where that applicant are coming back to the building commissioner, or some case checking in with Jonathan Simpson about what can and can't be done by right.
Okay. Other questions or comments before we move on? Okay, let's look at what are you going to put this up on the screen, Emily, or?
Yes, I will. If Jake, if you're there, can you post a link in the chat as well so people can follow along that way in case it's kind of hard to see on screen? Thank you. There we go. All right, made it nice and big. So, okay. I'm gonna go through it. I'm gonna ask Jonathan, Maria, Jonathan Klein, Jonathan Simpson to jump in. And we'll just go through the changes. Sorry, it's comments on it too, so it's a little bit big. To jump in whenever they would like. So
to be clear, what we're going to be looking at is a redlined draft of 4.0503, which is our ADU bylaw, right?
correct, yes. And so things have been changed in response to the AG letter. And then also there have been some staff recommendations as well.
Go for it.
Okay. So first, there have been some new definitions added. And that's for principal dwelling that we went over in the PowerPoint, and also accessory dwelling units. That was also in the PowerPoint. This is taken from the ADU model zoning that EOHLC posted. So that's the first change. Okay. The intent has stayed the same. And then when we get to B, we have habitable space crossed out because that was in the AGO letter, I believe, to change the gross floor area. To clarify that, and then principal dwelling added as well. We have the 900 square feet, and then gross floor area again. So this is talks about the maximum square footage, and this is according to the state. Okay. Feel free to jump in. And then we have some things taken out. So this corresponds to deleting because so there are some small changes, and then the AGO decision on page 13 gives feedback on only focusing on protected use as of right ADUs. So this section has been taken out because it mentions a special permit, and as of right, you can't require a special permit. Okay, Jonathan Simpson.
So I was forwarded a question earlier today about expanding. You know, could we permit larger ADUs? And the answer is yes. There's specific like the regulations as well as the AG's opinion decision on our former bylaw specifically contemplate this, but they contemplate doing it as simply expanding what a protected use ADU is locally, so that you would say all the protections that a protected use ADU has are now applied to ADUs of 1,200 square feet and smaller. That's distinct from what we had been doing, which is effectively creating a second category, which is also something a municipality can do. But as you note, my note, this says we were allowing for a very small, very narrow band of additional use cases, just ADUs between 900 and 950 square feet. And we felt that creating an entirely separate way to regulate those by way of special permit, just the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. If the subcommittee is interested in advancing a proposal to allow for larger ADUs, I think it's certainly worth a conversation. And both mechanisms could be viable, but we don't think it's worth doing just for this very, very narrow band of potential ADUs.
Well, let's stop and talk about that for a minute or for a couple of minutes, because I think that's an interesting point. I think the historical background here is that our original ADU bylaw was at 950 square feet, right? And then the state came in with the protected ADUs at 900, and when we when we made our last set of changes, we left in that discrepancy, right, for that 50 square foot addition by special permit. So I understand the argument that for 50 more square feet, it's not worth a whole separate mechanism. I get that completely. I am personally very interested in the discussion of whether we would want as a municipality to increase the 900 to a larger number, say 1,200 that you mentioned. I know that Newton has done that, and I've heard some good arguments about why that would make ADUs a more feasible way to, for homeowners and to meet the objectives of the statute. So I'm curious. I'm glad you raised that as being something that the AG said was possible, as something this committee could talk about, and whether that's something that makes sense to discuss now. And I'm curious what other people think about that.
I want to clarify real quick. So what Jonathan was talking about, increasing to 1,200 is the limit that you can have for protected use ADUs. But you can also have a local ADU provisions. So those would not be protected use, and that could be, someone could apply for that as well, and you could have more requirements for that than you can have a protected use.
So, and to clarify as well, so there's always like an additional thing to consider. So you can define protected use ADUs, as Emily and Jonathan said, and let's just use an example. Brookline will define protected use ADUs as up to 1,200 square feet by right. You can do it through the by right, or you might say, you know what, we want to use some caution with larger ADUs. So we're going to have protected use ADUs up to 900 square feet, but then we'll have this larger by special permit up to 1,200. By having this local, you can't call it a protected use because it's no longer by right. Having that local ADU option by special permit means you now can have 2 ADUs because you cannot limit, you have to have at least allow 1 protected use ADU. So if you do the larger by right, you can limit it to 1 ADU per lot. But if you want the special permit and the by right option, then you have to allow for more than 1 ADU per lot. So that's kind of the plus and minus you might want to consider.
I would, small clarification, you could, I think you could say you can go to 1,200 you can have a Maria is absolutely right. You always have to allow the 900 square foot unit by right. So there would be a sequencing question. If someone already had the 900 square foot unit, you could say you can't have another one, or you can only have another one by special permit, but they could flip that. But I think I'm complicating things.
So to get this straight in my mind, right now we have a protected use ADU in our bylaw at 900 square feet, and we have an optional non-protected use in our bylaw up to 950 square feet, right? The draft in front of us crossed that out, saying the juice isn't worth the squeeze just for an extra 50 feet, right? To have a whole, provision that people would have to go through. We could do nothing and accept that provision and just leave 900 square feet as it is. We could say we'd like to have larger protected use ADUs at 1,200 or maybe 1,100 or 1,000 or some number in between. There's nothing magic about 1,200. It's the maximum the state allows. Or we could go back to having the distinction between the two, right, and allow larger ADUs by special permit. Those are sort of the choices that are in front of the committee or in front of the town, more generally. Anybody have thoughts on that? Can we just stop a minute and, first I'll ask committee members and then members of the public. Tommy.
Yeah, I mean, I think my first inclination is that we should go to the maximum allowable square footage for the by right uses at 1,200 square feet. I understand we're talking about with having the special permit one and then the by right one. We could potentially quickly run into, people getting the special permit first, and that's going to go, to the planning board. And, how would we want to handle that on the planning board? Would we say, well, do you plan to build another 900 square foot one? Because I don't think the special permit would be able to then restrict the building of the future 900 square feet, units. So then you'd have 2 ADUs, and I could imagine, in advance, people in town meeting at large being somewhat skeptical of a town bylaw that allows 2 ADUs on a property. And so I think the better option is to just go to the maximum size by right at 1,200 square feet. That's my thought. Just to streamline the process, because I'm sure that's going to throw grit in the gears if people figure out that you could have 2.
I agree. I mean, I think the complication of having 2 per lot, it feels like it is something we ought to consider streamlining. I will say the one thing I wanted to walk through was the height restriction. So previously we did, numerous conversations, and in our original bylaw, we did have a height restriction because we were overall concerned about it. And so I'd like to better understand how expanding to 1,200, we can still sort of regulate the maximum height, because I know there will be neighbors concerned about that. And so for me, it's about balancing the two, the larger ADU and the rest of the impact in terms of height and massing and all of that.
Emily, did you want to talk a little bit about some of the back and forth we've had with the AGO, or in terms of height?
Yeah, sorry, I was
That's
trying to
okay.
answer your question. So for the height, back and forth, that Jonathan Simpson was able to figure out. Let me
I think
just give me one second.
while Emily's doing that, let's just provide a little context for folks. So what we have in the town meeting adopted bylaw is a maximum height of 22 feet with 1.5 stories. The AGO disapproved that, and it really goes back to that principal dwelling definition. So ADUs would be allowed in any zoning district where single family use is allowed, which means you could put an ADU in a 3-family or a 2-family or a multifamily, anything with one existing dwelling unit. And in Brookline, you have different maximum height allowances. So let's say in a multifamily district, you have a max height of 45 feet. That means the detached or the attached ADU can be a max height of 45 feet. Okay. But this is where we've had some back and forth with the AGO, and we've said, can we be a little bit creative? And I'm actually going to bring in another dimensional requirement. Is this where you want to pick it up, Emily, with the different option that we could, I guess a nice way to mediate what the town approved and what the AGO disapproved?
Yeah, I have some general information, not as specific as we might decide, but we were asking the AGO if we can tie height and setback, scale it, the amount of setback tied to the height. So if the setback is less, then the height would be less. If the setback is greater, then you could have a little more greater height. And the AGO's office indicated that should work. We still have to get it, approved by them to make sure. But that is an option potentially.
So is the question, and I see Tommy's hand too, but is the question whether that's a quote reasonable regulation that would be allowed, under Dover? Is that what the legal question is there? Yeah.
Yes. So the question was, so in general, what the AGO has stated that the dimensional standards cannot be more restrictive than what you have for accessory structures and principal dwellings.
Right.
So in Brookline, the accessory structures have a 6-foot side and rear. So one of the question we had asked, can we have a 6-foot setback for side and rear with a 22-foot max height, and then allow the full height of say 35 feet or 45 feet with a greater setback allowance, maybe 10, maybe 12. And so we haven't worked it out, but it appears that kind of scaling, tying the two together could be provable.
Okay. Tommy? Oh, you just moved around on my. Was your hand up, Tommy? Okay, maybe we've lost Tommy, but Jonathan, in the meantime.
Well, okay, so hope you don't have a quorum issue with Tommy gone. But I did want to.
I see his name, but he's not answering. So
I did want to. I think I've just been sorry. I've been a little quiet because I've been going back and forth with Emily. I'm not. I don't want to. That 1,200 square foot that Tommy just mentioned as the maximum allowed. I don't believe that's a maximum allowed under the statute that a municipality could define as a protected use ADU. I think it's used as an example. And I think it was used as an example in the email chain today. I think it would be much more, I don't want to anchor us to that number. Oh, we want to go bigger, let's do 1,200. And if there's a reason that someone who knows more about housing thinks 1,200 is more appropriate, but I wouldn't say if 1,250 is better, if 1,300, if 1,100 is better. I don't think there's a reason to focus on 1200 necessarily, other than the fact that the model bylaw just uses it as an example.
That's helpful. I will comment on that, I've had some back and forth with David Rockwell, who's active in Newton, and that pointed out to me that the Newton bylaw allows up to 1200 in some cases. And what they have found in Newton, which he said was interesting, is that when thinking about accessibility and building for turning radiuses of wheelchairs, that if the ability to build a unit which would allow 2 bedrooms, one for a caretaker and one for a resident, and if someone had a wheelchair because of modern accessibility requirements for turning radiuses and things like that, that 1200 is the number that makes sense to allow that to happen. So that was some justification for that 1200 number. Whether that's scientific or, what the basis of it is, other than his comment of what Newton has come to, I don't know. But other comments on this size question, as I don't think we're in a decision-making mode at this instant about it, but I'm trying to get the sense of the committee and also the sense of the public, if anybody else has anything to add.
May I add something?
Please.
Thank you. I think you also have to think about the acceptability to town meeting. And I think I personally would be concerned about a 1200 as of right, where the statute only requires 900 square feet as of right. Extending it beyond that 900 by special permit in circumstances where it was required for a wheelchair or other use, I think might resonate more with town meeting. But with regard to size and setbacks and height, certainly when Roger Blood and I were going through this process for the November town meeting, there was a great deal of concern about the impacts that there might be on abutters and on the neighborhood, particularly with larger buildings pushing against abutting properties. So I think that's something you really do have to keep in mind as you go through this process. And that relates to a couple of items, including size, setbacks, the concept of different setbacks for different heights or different sizes, I think, of the building does make sense. And I hope that you can get some traction there. And I think there'd be ways to draft that in the bylaw. So just a practical comment.
Thank you. Thank you. Katha Seidman? You're muted, Katha.
Permitting 1200 square feet in the simplest possible way. And I hear Dick talking about different lots and different circumstances and wanting to make some provision for those. But allowing 1200 square feet at least gives people an opportunity to have a second unit that they can rent in many circumstances. It also, when we talk about missing middle housing, that's the perfect sweet spot. So, as you say, whether it's 1100 or 1300, there is a real sweet spot for 1200 square foot apartments that, for working couples, that's a great size. So I think we should really find a way to permit that, not just because it's, ADU accessible, not ADU, wheelchair accessible, but because it's, because it would give more opportunities for more kinds of housing in the town. It also gives people an opportunity to allow their children's families to live in the same building.
Okay, thank you. I think I don't see any more hands up, and we have a lot to cover, and I think we've gotten a good discussion of this issue, so I'm going to suggest we move on, if that's okay. So back to you, Emily, I think. I think that gets us to B2.
Yes, B2. Okay, so that was talking about special permit, which needs to be as of right. So we're at B, would be, okay. Suggested language. With the open space requirements, there are no minimum open space requirements for an ADU. That is, I believe, a staff recommendation language there. Moving on, if there's no questions about that. So this section was disapproved by the AGO on page 5 and 6, talking about building envelope and setbacks. That has the FAR and FAR limit of 130%. So that was disapproved by the AGO. And an ADU is subject to the following. So staff recommends taking, but for the exceptions provided in 4.05 3B1, because there's no longer exception in that for 950-foot ADUs. So again, the square footage is for 950 feet that we discussed. So moving on to A, the AGO's office wanted us to take out any reference to single family. So detached was taken with that for an existing principal dwelling. So that was added. That's the language that they're looking for. Tommy just said that he's having camera issues. So I think he's just got an email from him. If someone can let him back in when he comes in. So that's the principal dwelling that was added. One thing that staff flagged is table 5.01 does not include accessory structures. And we have asked the AGO's office for some advice talking about the dimensional requirements. So now we're at 2B. If you're following along on your own document, this was disapproved on page 7 by the AGO's office, which is the wording prescribed for the principal dwelling. And if there's anything we want to discuss, we can go back to the whole group, Jonathan. So then again, these are the setback things that we were talking about just previously, the side yard reference and the setback reference. So in the response, preliminary response from the AGO's office, we could probably do the scaling that Maria discussed, and that's kind of pertains to this part as well. So we're at C. This section was disapproved by the AGO on page 7. This is talking about heights again and footprints.
And just to clarify again, I know I'm repeating myself, but you're striking them here, but in effect, the Attorney General has already struck them. So they're technically not even in our bylaw because they were just struck, right?
Yeah, correct. Right. It's more of a cleanup thing.
Yeah, okay.
And then this section was disapproved by the AGO on page 8. And this again is talking about setbacks, height, footprints for the building. So we're at E right now. Does someone say something? Okay. We're at E, and this was approved by the AGO but flagged and this could be tested under the Dover Amendment, referring to the AGO decision, page 16. So this talks about the required by right height and setbacks, the screening and the vegetation, shrubs and trees. Is there, Maria, is there anything else you want to add to this, or? No.
Yeah, no.
Okay.
Comfortable where the Attorney General said it might be an issue, whether it's a reasonable regulation or not. I'm not going to strike it. You can leave it in. Just beware that someone could challenge it.
Yeah.
That's what that means. Okay.
Under Dover.
Under Dover.
Yeah.
Yep.
Because, as we said, a protected use are covered under Dover, the Dover Amendment.
Okay. Keep going.
Okay, so this section was disapproved too on page 9 of the AGO decision. It talks about the facade. So they said that's not allowed. We have some sections that were untouched. Okay. And then we have this section was disapproved, talking about a building permit the special permit needs to be as of right. That's on page 10 of the AGO decision. And then the provision of subsection 1A and E of section 5.22, section 5.43, 5.63, 5.72, and 4.04 shall not apply to creation of ADUs. This was flagged by staff. And again, that was one of the questions to the AGO's office. I'm not sure if we got clarification on this.
Yeah. Jonathan, could you, for those of us that didn't look up all those references, could you explain this and tell us what this all applies to and what the concern is?
Sure. And I apologize. I might not be as conversant in all of these as I should be, but the big one, basically, these are a number of requirements related to other accessory structures and the relief that other types of uses can get that we wanted to preclude. We basically wanted to confine ADUs to what relief was available within this section. And so we were sort of excluding them from relief that like 5.43 for setback relief that other uses can enjoy. And it was the AGO, I think there's sort of, while it passed the test that the regulations kind of put front and center, which is this, are your dimensional requirements the most permissive available among the listed, potential uses of, accessory use or principal dwelling or single family residential dwelling? While it does pass that test, the AGO did caution that this could easily work out in a manner that this sort of philosophy could work out in a manner that you've made your regulations unreasonable. If you say like ADUs don't get to take advantage of this long string of things that other uses can do, you might be effectively making them unavailable. So we just have to proceed with some caution here. But yeah, so as of right now, I don't think this kind of approach where we're sort of saying, looking around the rest of the zoning bylaw and saying ADUs kind of need to be, can't take advantage of, it's not they're being more strictly regulated. It's that they can't take advantage of something that another use can take advantage of. I think we're probably okay there. We just do need to sort of if we're going to do that, we needed to maybe take a step back and make sure we're not inadvertently compromising the ability to build them at all.
So so that's a really helpful overview explanation, and I'll invite myself and anybody else who wants to go look at each of those sections and see if they have any concerns about it but otherwise it seems fine to leave it as is.
Jonathan, just 563 and 572 pertain to the setbacks for accessory structures.
Okay. So I kind of walked into that one because I had been focused on, when I talked to the AGO, I was focused on 5.43, which is setback relief, which is my comments were just related to that. This section is on its face inapplicable, like invalid, to the extent where it's attempting to exclude ADUs from taking advantage of what we allow accessory uses to do. And I apologize that my unfamiliarity with some of the section numbers didn't take me straight to that point. But yes, we can't say, because it's effectively saying an ADU can't use the same setback as an accessory use, and that's impermissible. I mean, that the regulations don't permit that. That's one of the reasons that was all over the AG's decision.
Okay. Dick, question?
Thank you. Actually, a comment there. The answer there might be to have the same sort of concept for accessory structures as you're contemplating for accessory dwelling units, and that is a smaller setback for a tool shed, and a larger setback for a carriage house. Neither of which are accessory dwelling units, both of which would be classified as accessory structures. But you could essentially build, I believe, off of that, or at least think of that. You're thinking of that sort of construct for ADUs. You might think of incorporating that into the bylaws for accessory structures. And if I might, let me just raise one other caution so it doesn't slip my mind. And that is, I believe we've now lost, by virtue of the regulations, the ability to limit the footprint of an ADU. I think we had a maximum footprint, as I recall, in our bylaw that we passed in November. If we have lost that, I think it would behoove us to think about retaining an open space lot coverage limitation, which is allowed under the AG's regulations. This is not going to probably have any impact at all in a neighborhood like the one I live in, which the lots are somewhat larger, but I think essentially stripping away all open space and lot coverage limitations or open space limitations in the areas of town with smaller lots could also be problematical for a lot of town meeting members. That's all.
Thank you for that comment. That wasn't an issue I had focused on yet, but duly noted, unless somebody on the staff wants to respond. Otherwise, we can keep moving on. Okay, thank you. So does that get us to 3?
Yes. So we have exterior appearance.
So out of 16 provisions, we've now been going for close to an hour, and we've gotten through the first 2. So
Well, about half. So we have exterior appearance. This was flagged by the AGO on page 21. Single family was taken out, which is also flagged or is disallowed by the AGO decision and changed to principal dwelling. So a principal dwelling containing ADU shall have no more than 2 means of egress facing the street upon which the property faces. Maria, do you remember any information on why that was flagged, the exterior appearance?
Yeah, I think because it could conflict with we can go to that page, but if I recall correctly, the AGO's office was concerned about any conflicts with the building code. because this had to do with egress. Am I right, Jonathan?
I would have to double check.
Okay, we'll keep moving. If you find that, just jump in, feel free. Okay, so exterior altercations, that the materials they did not say anything about. The parking was disallowed, so we crossed that out. But I have presented some options for language. If you recall from the first presentation, you cannot require parking within a half mile of a bus station or a T station, essentially, which Brookline has. Consistently across town. I don't have it in front of me, but so we can either say just in general, do a blanket, no off-street parking is required, or we can leave in the language, no off-street parking is required for ADUs located within half a mile radius of a bus or T station. Are there any thoughts about those two options?
Well, this seems worth discussion. I'll just venture my opinion as a starting point, which is I like no off-street parking requirement for ADUs. I'm like to find ways to create more ADUs. Parking often is expensive and, makes that a challenge. I think overall reducing parking requirements to build more parking is a good idea. It's just my kind of political view of things, and I know others may disagree with that. So this could be a discussion item, but if I had to check a box, I'd check no off-street parking, but I'd like to hear other views from the committee and also from the public on this. Tommy.
Yeah, I agree wholeheartedly that I think no off-street parking required for ADUs is the better approach to try to fill in housing where we can get it. And also, I haven't mapped it out or anything, but half mile to a T station or a bus stop is probably not going to leave a ton of space in large parts of Brookline anyway. And I think I think generally it's better to not require parking if we can help it. And I certainly think it's better for the ADUs.
It pretty much breaks down just, and I'll generalize and someone will correct me if I'm stating this, badly, to North Brookline and South Brookline. Almost
Right.
all of Brookline is within a mile, and very little of South Brookline except a very small portion is within the half mile. So that's kind of how it breaks down when you think about it. Kelly?
Oops, sorry. So my question would be, if the second provision were used, which is no off-street parking required for ADUs within a half mile, what then would the parking requirements be to default? What would they default to?
I believe it's one space.
Okay.
Is that correct? Can someone else verify that?
Yeah, I think
Let's-
it's no more than one, right? Jonathan, it's no more than one that we can require.
We can't require any. Well, sorry. Is Kelly's question if you're more than the required distance from a?
Right.
Okay.
If you're
Yes,
more
I
than
believe
half
it's
a
no
mile
more
away.
than. I believe it's no more than one.
Yep.
Okay.
In that situation.
Okay. I am concerned about accessibility. Again, what we know about the way the town is structured is the larger lots tend to be in South Brookline, which has far less access. And so I would want to ensure that people moving into ADUs did have a reasonable transportation option. And so I think right now I definitely default to option 2, not requiring it within half a mile, but really would like to explore it a little further and understand what the impact of that would be.
If I could, I apologize, Jonathan. If I could just,
Go ahead.
I'm getting text. I need to go get my daughter from camp.
Okay.
The pickup has fallen through, so I have to excuse myself. I'm very sorry, everyone. This was not.
Thank
planned.
you,
Okay.
and your daughter's,
Okay.
go for it. Thank you. Dick, I saw your hand up before. Oh, now
Yeah.
it's back. Go ahead.
Well, you may want to consider this question in light of a provision I think we haven't gotten to yet, which was eliminated by the Attorney General, and that was the requirement that if a garage space is turned into an ADU, the building commissioner has to, or would have the right to determine whether parking was required. And I'm wondering whether that requirement, if you want to strike a middle ground, whether you might impose that requirement where you're a half a mile or more from T station, because I think that would be permitted.
That's a really good point. I had seen that had piece about the garage conversion had been struck, and so had been walking towards that. But that's a really good point, Dick. Good suggestion.
So putting it, you're saying it would be within the discretion of the building inspector.
In a situation, at least where a garage was eliminated, or you know, you could have it generally, if you're more than a half a mile, it's not flat out required, but there is a discretionary decision about a parking space. You know, it doesn't have to be either or, is my point.
Mm-hmm. I get that. Where that's a good compromise suggestion. Other thoughts on parking before we keep moving?
Just a quick check. Can people hear me right now? Because my camera went
Yes.
out again.
Yes.
All right,
Hear
great.
you. Okay. Glad you're still with us. Because otherwise we wouldn't have a quorum. Okay, keep going, Emily.
All right. What Dick just mentioned is the conversion of garage space. So staff recommends deleting the first part, an ADU that is created by conversion of a pre-existing garage, including existing garage in a separate structure from the primary residential building. And then the ADU disapproved, the last part, shall provide an off-street parking plan subject to the approval of the building commissioner. I believe this is because it's not an as of right process, and taking that part out, the sentence doesn't really, the first part doesn't really make sense, is what I recall. Are there any thoughts on that beyond what Dick mentioned?
So I don't understand. Does this mean we cannot require it subject to approval of the building commissioner?
Yes. Because it's a as of right process.
But I think we should take Dick's comment into consideration and keep going to the other items. We can come back to this.
Okay, sounds good. So allowable means of egress. If a required means of egress from an ADU requires an exterior stairway, any such stairway may not exceed 2 stories in height nor be visible from a public way. Staff recommends the egress requirement should be consistent with the building code. Maria, do you have anything to add? Is this inconsistent to the building code, these requirements? Is that what we were thinking?
Well, keep in mind, when this bylaw was written, people were contemplating single family 2.5 stories. So the stairway not exceed two stories is, you know, you might have an ADU in a 4-story building. Theoretically, that could happen. So it might be better to word this as just reminding people that egress needs to be consistent with what the building code requires.
Okay. I'm just gonna put a note, internal ADUs especially may be in a higher level than 2 stories. Okay. So we're going to move forward to curb cut limits. With this, staff recommends deletion because there's a 5-year look back. ADUs may not be located on any lot that is accessed from a public or private street by more than 1 curb cut, except for lots having more than 1 pre-existing curb cut for a period of at least 5 years. And the changes that recommended changes, the ADU shall be accessed by curb cuts serving the principal dwelling. With this recommendation, I think it just seems a little too stringent with the 5-year look back and the curb cuts, that it made sense, especially with how much parking is required, that it's just the same curb cut as the principal dwelling. Yes, it's Kelly.
Thanks. Actually, I wanted to go back to section 8, which was only 1 ADU per lot. No more than 1 ADU shall be allowed per lot. And just reference our previous discussion where we were discussing protected use ADUs and the potential local use. If this 1 ADU per lot is still standing, again, we would still be limited to 1 ADU per lot. I just want to go back because I think I had perhaps misunderstood that if we, there was a change that was possible that would have allowed multiple ADUs per lot. Did I misunderstand?
No, you're correct. That's a good point. So there can be more ADUs per lot if there is a local option for ADUs. I think Maria, did you want to jump in on this one too?
Yeah, I think what could be helpful, Kelly, is to use a precise term, protected use ADU. Because that one, the regulation, the state regs say no
Right.
more than 1 per lot. You'd be consistent with that. And unless you have a definition for local, which you may in the future, you really are not going to run afoul. You'll know what you're getting.
Okay, so do
Great,
we want
thank
to
you.
change the language for this one, for this section?
What I would do is I think it's okay to have that just to reinforce, but I think we just might want to make a global change and change the term ADU to protected use ADU.
What do other people think about that?
Just keep in mind, Emily, that folks are still contemplating how they want to treat, the larger versus the local. So I don't think that discussion is necessarily closed. I think I understand how it might go, but so you might need to come back to this.
Right. I think the point here is that this connects with the earlier discussion and
Yep.
needs to be meeting.
Okay.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that we're consistent.
Oh, good point, Kelly.
Whatever we decide our consistency.
Right. Absolutely. Is there any thoughts on the curb cut, the suggested language for curb cut? Or what's changed? Okay. And then we're about 10 till, we will have time the next meeting to discuss some things, but I think we wanted to talk about follow-up too, Jonathan.
I'm sorry, I got distracted for a minute looking at number 11. Can you say that again, Emily?
We have about 10 minutes till 2, which was our stopping point. Did we want to keep going, or do you want to save the rest for next meeting and talk about follow-up? What do you think?
Well, why don't we stop? Thank you for that reminder. I'll take it. I'll take the bait. Why don't we stop and talk about process of what we've covered so far, what we need to do, the next meeting, and maybe see if let me start with whether there's a staff suggestion about how we approach the rest of our work. What's left here? I think we've talked about the meaty issues so far, except the really complex issue that got raised but not resolved, relating to setbacks and height. Am I getting that right?
Yes, I believe so.
And are we still waiting on that issue, waiting for more clarification from the Attorney General and Jonathan Simpson, or we've gotten what we're going to get, and we have to now draft and come up with something that we think complies?
The latter.
Okay. And do you have thoughts about doing that before our next meeting and having something to present on it, or what's the thought from planning?
Speaking for myself, not even for my department, I will say that I think that setbacks and height conversation is very complex. And we want to be careful to make sure as many people are educated about whatever we do to touch it before doing it, no matter where it is on the spectrum of permissiveness. And I'm not sure that the best way to do that, to be honest. So to be clear, right now, the way town meeting passed the rules and then what the AG struck, you could have a detached ADU, for example, that's 35-foot tall, but enjoys the more permissive setbacks that are town meeting passed. And I think that's the critical one from a protectionist point of view, that I think town meeting members need to understand. And then from there, I think this is where I'm relying on you all as a subcommittee. How much would you want to take that 35-foot back down to 22, knowing that we have to treat sheds, detached ADUs, and principal structures all the same? And there's several, I don't know. I don't have a good answer for that. I think that needs some more discussion from this committee of what would be reasonable, what to aim for. And I don't think that could be answered quickly.
Well, let me lay out the schedule as I understand it, which is all right. All I'm going to do is repeat what's in the agenda, right? But just remind us. So we've scheduled a subcommittee meeting for a week from tomorrow at the same time, 12:30 to 2 by Zoom.
On Wednesday. On Wednesday.
Yep, a week from tomorrow, for an hour and a half. We are a subcommittee of the Housing Advisory Board, and their next regular meeting is on September 3rd at 5:30 to 7:30. The filing deadline for warrant articles is the next day, September 4th at noon, rather tight. And town meeting starts on November 18th. And that gets me back to the comment that I made originally, or suggested originally, which is that we have a lot of things here that are pretty clear cut based on the Attorney General's, striking of parts of our bylaw and definitive statements about what we can and can't do. We have some other things that seem to require more discussion and thought and may be harder to resolve in that short time period before town meeting. I'll also mention that I'm personally leaving town on August 23rd for 2 weeks and not anxious to, have more meetings after that date. So really, I think the question here is if we take Kara, Kara's comment, which I do, that these are complex issues and probably not need more thought and discussion than we can accomplish in the next 2 or 3 weeks. Do we want to bifurcate what we're doing here and pass what we can, and that is relatively straightforward? I'll put that term relatively in quotes, and leave the most complicated issues for later, or do we want to leave everything for later? And how does the staff feel about the work involved in all that? Because I think that's a consideration.
I think we have to also discuss what group is going to be the petitioner.
Right. So there's a question of how this would get to town meeting. Would it be us as the subcommittee members as petitioners, or we don't have the formal authority as a subcommittee to file a petition? The HAB doesn't have the formal authority to do that. I don't think the planning department has the formal authority to do that. I think the select board could, or some group of us that comes to agreement on this, having worked on it as a committee, could do it in that way. So that's a question too. So I'm going to open the floor to all those thoughts. First to committee members, to Kelly and Tommy, if you have thoughts on it, and also I'm anxious to get recommendations from the staff here.
Emily, it might be helpful for the committee, sorry to interrupt. It might be helpful, Emily, for the committee to hear from you, your conversation with Dan about, at the end of the day, what does Dan need? What is he looking for? What happens if we don't do anything this fall?
That's important. That's important.
Yes. I don't want to speak for him, but he says that he can, he's good with what the state is requiring right now. That's what he's carrying out. And so from what he's mentioned to me today, it sounds like he knows moving forward if he gets applications, what he needs to do. He just doesn't know if, like, right now it's 900 square feet and that's what he's going to carry out. He doesn't know what people might change or add that would change or add how he carries things out based on a warrant article.
Got it.
So another option would be for this subcommittee to write a report to town meeting with some of the, key questions. And that way town meeting season can talk about this and people can, really get it and understand it, but without the looming of a full warrant article. I have mixed feelings on whether we should take care of some of the language now that's easy to tackle, because it does mean hours and hours and hours and hours of meetings that we're gonna have to come back again, to get to the tougher issues. But it might be that a report to town meeting would generate just as much conversation and get it on people's radars so that we could then come back and deal with the heightened setback issue. But, I appreciate you all as a subcommittee doing this work, because these are the tough questions that we need your help with, of how fast to move.
Yeah, and the other issue I think that requires some discussion, maybe not as complicated as the height and setback issue, as the size question.
Yeah.
And how to approach that. Kelly and Tommy, do you have thoughts in the last couple of
Sure.
minutes? And we can come back to this at our next meeting. We don't have to
Sure.
make any decision today. I think this sets the table for our next meeting, but
Mhm.
I want to hear from Kelly and Tommy.
Sure. I had a question, and really it was about the amount of work. So again, looking at the schedule and recognizing that September 4th is coming quickly. In terms of the amount of work, is it reasonable to try to get this done or not? Increasingly, I am wondering, again, given the complexity of what we need to tackle, sort of the heightened awareness and sensitivity around town meeting and around town, I'm just trying to figure out, realistically, what can we get done by September 4th? And I know.
Yeah, I think I think the draft that town staff has already been working on is coming along nicely, and I think we could get this done, because to some extent I think we don't need to overthink it. I think Brookline needs more housing. We have to comply with the state law. I like housing, personally, and I mean, we can say that these issues are incredibly complex, but we can also write them into a warrant article and make our recommendation that we want more housing. We think these sizes are appropriate, these setbacks are appropriate, these parking requirements are appropriate, and let it come out in the wash a little bit. I'm not sure we need to, hem and haw and wait 6 months and keep grinding away on it when we can streamline it and let town meeting have their say. That's just my thought.
Well, I'm hearing a mixed view on that. And maybe that's where it should sit until next Wednesday. We'll have 6 days, less at that point, or 7 days less at that point, but we could leave it there, and we could, look at what we've done and what we've discussed and see if there is a draft. We can't confer with each other except in a very, very limited way outside of this meeting because of the open meeting law. But we can perhaps have a little bit of work being done in the meantime and put this first on the agenda for the meeting next week. Based on the comments we've made so far and people's ability to go back and, review this draft now that we've gone through it, understand most of it, and understand what the issues are. That's my way of not making a decision. Any We have a minute left. Any final comments from the committee or the public or the staff? Well, in that
I'll
case,
just say this has been great feedback, even as far as we got. It's amazing. Thank you. Thanks to Maria and Emily for doing so much work behind the scenes and talking with Dan. And we will keep making edits as if we're going to file something this fall before the next meeting.
okay. Thank you very much. Thanks,
Thanks, guys.
everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Appreciate everybody's work, and we'll look forward to seeing you at the next meeting. And we'll be joined, I believe, by Alex Krieger, who's the fourth member of our subcommittee and who could not make it today, unfortunately.
Sorry about being late. I just was working out, ran out of time, so my apologies.
Okay.
Bye,
Glad you're here.
guys.
Okay.
Thanks, everyone.